Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Have you ever felt something like this? Stay with me until the end and share your thoughts. The rain-slicked window of the Main Street Cafe was a canvas of distorted city lights, mirroring the fractured state of the man inside. Alex sat alone at a corner table, his figure swallowed by the shadows, looking profoundly out of place despite his deliberate efforts to blend in. His rough, faded denim jacket was too warm for the indoor setting, and the faint smell of motor oil and sawdust clung to him, a costume he wore with the awkwardness of a king forced into rags. He wasn't simply waiting. He was performing a desperate, silent act, seeking an authentic connection in a world that only ever saw his net worth. The discomfort wasn't from the hard wooden chair or the cheap coffee. It was the heavy cloak of a carefully constructed lie he was about to wear for the first time in front of someone new. The tension in his jaw was the only thing that betrayed the man who, mere hours ago, had commanded a boardroom of the world's elite. Every gesture felt rehearsed, from the way he nervously fumbled with a crumpled $5 bill to the unnaturally stiff set of his shoulders. His inner world, usually one of supreme control and calculated risk, was now a storm of vulnerability. He desperately wanted this blind date to see the man. Not the money, but the fear of being exposed was a constant, icy breath on the back of his neck. This tiny, humble cafe felt like a trap, and the silence between sips of cold coffee was deafening, forcing him to confront the profound loneliness that wealth had unexpectedly forged around him. A harsh silver glow momentarily caught the camera's attention as Alex shifted his left arm to check the time, a movement he immediately regretted. For a fleeting second, the cuff of the worn denim sleeve slid back, revealing the unmistakable gleam of a custom-made heavy-link platinum watch, a masterpiece of horological engineering that cost more than the entire street block. It was a searing high-contrast flash of his real identity, hidden in plain sight, an inadvertent confession of the enormous, dangerous secret he held. He quickly adjusted the sleeve, the movement sharp and defensive, but the damage, the subtle dissonance, had been done. This small, almost imperceptible detail, the blinding brilliance of true wealth under the guise of blue-collar struggle, was the whole story. Alex, the CEO of the world's most powerful tech conglomerate, was pretending to be a simple construction worker, desperate for an honest look, a genuine smile, a love untainted by the scent of a balance sheet. He was gambling his entire emotional future on this fragile, transparent lie, and the clock was ticking. He was waiting for Clara, a woman who only knew him as Alex, the nice guy from the dating app, unaware that she was about to sit down with a phantom, a broken, lonely millionaire disguised by a pair of $5 work boots. The cafe door chimed, a brittle, hopeful sound that cut through the low murmur of the establishment. Clara entered, bringing with her the crisp scent of antiseptic and overwork. She was not glamorous. She was exhausted. Her sensible coat was slightly damp from the rain, and the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes were a testament to her life. A relentless cycle of double shifts at the county hospital, silently battling the escalating costs of caring for her elderly father. She scanned the room. With a practiced, weary efficiency, her entire being radiating a noble but fragile determination. She spotted Alex in the corner, and a faint flicker of disappointment crossed her face. Not because he wasn't handsome, he was undeniably even under the grubby veneer, but because he looked exactly like what she expected, a genuinely nice guy who was also struggling. She had hoped, perhaps foolishly, for a break, a distraction from the constant weight of her financial insecurity. Instead, she saw a reflection of her own tireless low-income reality. She approached the table, her steps heavy, yet imbued with an unwavering, practical honesty. "Alex," she asked, her voice low and direct, already sitting down before waiting for a confirmation, a sign of her no-nonsense pragmatism. "I'm Clara. Sorry I'm late. The shift ran over. Mr. Henderson's lab results were complicated." She didn't offer a cheerful facade. She offered her truth. This raw, immediate sincerity hit Alex like a physical blow. He was instantly captivated, seeing the genuine steel beneath the exhaustion, a quality he never encountered in the glittering, superficial world he usually inhabited. Alex's breath hitched, the meticulously prepared small talk vanishing from his mind. He managed a strained, silent nod, the sight of her simple, unadorned presence instantly puncturing his elaborate charade. He felt a sudden, profound guilt. This woman, this bedrock of real-world sacrifice, deserved the truth, not this poor theater. He was staging. The gap between his $5 persona and his actual billion-dollar existence felt monstrous, a silent abyss that could swallow their fragile connection whole. I work construction, Alex mumbled, deliberately emphasizing the rough, rolled R in a way that sounded entirely unnatural to his polished private school ear. Hard day. Had to patch up a few things over at the docks. He paused, forcing a smile that felt brittle. What's it like, being a nurse? Must be tough. Real tough. His phrasing was clumsy, the questions too vague, revealing a man who hadn't truly needed to ask genuine questions about hard labor in decades. Clara simply observed him, over the rim of her cheap, borrowed teacup, her gaze unblinking and unnervingly perceptive. It's tough when the system fails people, she replied, her voice firm, avoiding the personal pain point. She then looked directly at his hands, those hands that signed multi-million-dollar contracts, now deliberately, calloused with a thin layer of cosmetic dust. Your hands look unclean for a long day on the docks, and that's not a dock worker's cologne you're wearing, Alex. It smells like something ridiculously expensive. The silence that followed was thick and immediate, a powerful magnetic moment of unexpected confrontation that shattered his carefully constructed daily routine and forced him to choose between a full confession or a deeper, more dangerous lie. Clara's directness hung in the air like a pulled thread, threatening to unravel Alex's entire disguise. He instinctively pulled his jacket tighter, trying to shield his wrist and the cologne that was a subtle, cruel reminder of his real life. The color rose in his neck, a genuine flush of shame and fear, not because she might expose his wealth, but because her sharp, honest assessment made him feel truly seen, a terrifying experience after years of emotional armor. He deflected with a practiced, quick humor that was meant to be endearing, but sounded forced even to his own ears. A colleague gave it to me, he lied, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping conspiratorially. Said it would help me get a girl like you. Guess it's too much, huh? Should have stuck to my usual deodorant. He was trying to rationalize, to turn the conversation back into the safe, shallow waters of a first date, yet every internal fiber screamed at him to stop. This resistance was a defense mechanism, a reflex, honed by years of being burned by gold diggers and hangers-on who only saw the glint of his family name. The deception felt necessary, a painful inoculation against future hurt. But Clara's eyes, the color of wet stone, didn't waver. She wasn't judging the cologne. She was judging the hesitation, the faint tremor in his hands. This persistent, silent scrutiny dragged Alex back to a specific, painful memory. He suddenly recalled a quiet evening years ago, sitting with his late mother in their sprawling, silent estate. She'd looked at him. Her gaze weighted with sadness and whispered, "They'll love the house, Alex, but who will love the boy inside the walls?" That phrase, that question, was the blueprint for his current deception, a justification for the protective lie he was living now. He took a slow, deliberate sip of the lukewarm coffee, the bitterness flooding his mouth, a physical sensation mirroring the acidic resentment he felt toward his own fortune. He saw the empty tables. Around them, the simple, honest clutter of the small cafe, and felt an intense, irrational longing for a life where a single $20 bill meant something, where his actions weren't constantly filtered through the lens of his net worth. He longed to be the struggling, authentic man Clara seemed to assume he was, just for one night. This internal conflict manifested as a physical restlessness. He pushed his worn-out work boot against the leg of the table, the boot he'd bought for the precise purpose of this disguise, and the movement dislodged something small from his jacket pocket. It was a silver key fob, exquisitely designed, bearing the barely discernible logo of the high-end private bank that managed his assets. It slid silently onto the floor nearly at Clara's feet. A sharp jolt of panic seized Alex. He quickly bent down, his movements too fast, too desperate for a casual piece of debris. He snatched the fob back, stuffing it deep into his trousers pocket, his heart hammering against his ribs. Clara pretended not to notice, focusing intently on stirring her tea, yet the micro-gesture, the sudden extreme fear in his eyes, had already been registered by the experienced nurse who was trained to read subtle signs of distress and hidden trauma. His internal monologue was a rapid-fire succession of rationalizations. I need to leave. I've seen her. She's wonderful, but the risk is too great. I will only hurt her when the truth comes out. He tried to calculate an exit, but the simple weight of Clara's presence, her tired dignity, her quiet resilience, held him captive. She was the opposite of every woman he'd ever met, and the thought of walking away from this authentic, immediate connection felt like a profound spiritual loss he couldn't afford. "Look," Clara finally said, her voice soft but authoritative, like a triage nurse addressing a patient in denial. "I've had a long day. I don't need games or mysteries. I just need a simple, honest conversation." She didn't press him on the cologne or the key fob, but the meaning was clear. His resistance was noted, and the clock on his sincerity was running out. That quiet ultimatum, coming from a place of exhaustion and profound integrity, momentarily stripped Alex of his power, forcing him to confront the superficiality of his own carefully orchestrated life. The date continued under the fragile banner of mutual wary curiosity. They spoke of small things, their favorite childhood books, the sheer absurdity of hospital bureaucracy, the simple relief of a quiet Sunday morning. Yet, every few minutes, a fresh crack appeared in Alex's carefully crafted facade. When Clara mentioned her favorite budget wine, Alex corrected her on the vintage and suggested a pairing with a complexity that belied a construction worker's palate. His momentary, unconscious arrogance was a flashing signal that Clara, the quiet observer, filed away without comment, stirring a deep unease within her. The escalating tension found its first major inflection point when Clara received a frantic text message. Her face instantly drained of color, her hand trembling slightly as she read the update. "It's my father," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "The hospital is escalating his care. They just sent the preliminary bill. It's astronomical. We were barely keeping up with the last one." The raw fear in her voice was a chilling mirror of the insecurity and financial fragility that Alex had managed to escape decades ago. Without thinking, Alex instinctively reached for his wallet, pulling out a slim, black, leather card holder, the one that held his exclusive Centurion card, the black card, and not the worn Velcro wallet with the cash he'd prepared for the act. His movement was swift, driven by the immediate, overwhelming need to eliminate her pain. Clara saw the dark, matte plastic before he could fully retract it and switch to the crumpled bills. "No, Alex," she said, her voice sharp with a sudden, fierce pride. "I appreciate it, but no, I don't take charity, especially from someone I just met." The rejection, though respectful, stung Alex deeply. He realized his money, the solution to all his problems, was poison to her independent spirit. This incident triggered a desperate internal scramble. He excused himself, walking quickly towards the cafe restroom. Once inside the sterile fluorescent light, he pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the number of his chief financial officer. He considered making an anonymous donation to the county hospital, or perhaps purchasing Clara's father's medical debt entirely. He was a CEO accustomed to solving problems with unilateral action and massive resources, but that would only further complicate the truth and betray Clara's dignity. Later that evening, as Alex was walking Clara to her aging, unreliable car, another narrative clue was planted. Her old sedan refused to start, the engine grinding uselessly. "It's the alternator again," she sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose in defeat. "Another bill I can't afford right now." Alex knelt instantly, looking under the hood. His diagnosis was immediate and perfectly accurate, but his explanation used sophisticated, highly technical jargon that would only be familiar to a high-level automotive engineer, not a general construction worker. "The flux capacitor is shot," Alex said, then immediately caught himself, trying to dumb down the language. "I mean, the belt thing is broken. It needs a quick fix, but a good fix." Clara looked at him, not at the engine, her brow furrowed with increasing suspicion. "You know a lot about high-end automotive repair for a guy who patches up docks, Alex." The air thinned between them. Alex, flustered, made a hurried excuse, promising to have a friend look at it the next day, and rushed her into a cab, needing to escape the relentless pressure of his own contradictions. The final decisive proof of the growing conflict arrived the following morning. Clara, on her way to her shift, found an expensive charcoal-grey cashmere scarf wrapped neatly around her car's side mirror. It was Alex's. As she unfolded it, a small silver paperclip, a high-design accessory for holding rare paper documents, fell out. Attached to it was a folded note, which wasn't from Alex, but a rushed, professional email printout, clearly forgotten. The subject line of the email screamed the truth. Urgent. Q3 earnings, call strategy, CEO review needed. The sender was his executive assistant, the recipient was A. Vance, and the content referenced a pending multi-billion-dollar merger with a company whose name Clara instantly recognized from the news. Her breath caught in her throat. The man she thought was struggling to make rent was actually the global head of the largest tech company in the region, a name synonymous with untouchable inherited wealth. Clara felt a profound cold wave of betrayal and confusion wash over her. It wasn't the money, it was the audacious, deliberate lie. She raced to her car, her hands shaking, and scrolled through the contacts on her phone until she found his number. She didn't call. Instead, she drove to the address listed at the bottom of the email, the corporate headquarters of Vance Global. Arriving at the imposing glass skyscraper, a monument to power that dwarfed her humble existence, she demanded to see Alex Vance, the construction worker. The security guard, a man used to filtering out the insignificant, smirked. Alex Vance? The CEO? He's in the penthouse suite, ma'am. He hasn't been in the field in 2 decades. That confirmation, delivered with such dismissive finality, was the ultimate cliffhanger, the moment her perception of reality shattered. Clara felt a sudden, righteous fury, a sense of injustice burning through her. Exhaustion. She parked her car, waited for hours, and finally she saw him. Not the man in the denim jacket, but Alex Vance. Tailored suit, impeccable posture, surrounded by a phalanx of security and sharply dressed executives. He was climbing into a long, black armored sedan, a vehicle that could buy the entire Main Street cafe. The disparity, the sheer magnitude of the deception, was almost physically sickening. She followed the car, a desperate, angry pursuit that led her across the city, far from her familiar, modest neighborhood, until the massive vehicle pulled into a gated drive, disappearing behind a towering wall. Through the wrought-iron gate, Clara glimpsed a sprawling estate, a mansão silenciosa that looked less like a home and more like an intimidating, isolated fortress. She parked, her heart pounding, pulled out her phone, and sent Alex a single furious text message. The black card, the cologne, the lie. Explain. Alex's phone buzzed sharply in the cavernous, quiet library of his estate, the single, furious text message from Clara acting like a siren in the vast silence. He recognized the number and instantly knew the fragile truth he'd tried to protect had been brutally exposed. The world of calculated risks and negotiated settlements vanished, replaced by the stark reality of his deepest fear, being rejected for his lie. He ignored the pending merger documents scattered across his antique mahogany desk and raced toward the security monitor. He saw her face on the screen. Clara parked down the street, illuminated by the lonely yellow glow of a distant street lamp, her posture rigid with hurt and indignation. Her presence there, miles away from her familiar world of sacrifice and honest labor, was the ultimate accusation. It wasn't the CEO she had driven to see, but the liar who had sought to manipulate her emotions under false pretenses. This was the moment of reckoning he had always dreaded, a pain far sharper than any corporate takeover gone wrong. He didn't call the security team. He didn't put on another disguise. He simply walked. He flung open the heavy oak doors, the sound echoing through the night, and sprinted down the driveway, through the massive gates, leaving the silent, judgmental fortress of his wealth behind him. He reached Clara's beat-up sedan, his breath ragged, not from the exertion, but from the sudden, intense vulnerability of being stripped bare. Clara remained. Inside the car, her hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, her eyes, usually so warm and tired, now cold with a sense of betrayal. The car's interior was small and familiar, a sanctuary of her own honest struggle, and it felt like a silent interrogation room. She didn't need words. Her silence was a wall of unwavering moral judgment. She had been betrayed not for money, but by the assumption that she would judge him for the lack of it, and Alex finally understood the true depth of his mistake. Alex leaned down, resting his forehead against the damp glass of her window, his tailored suit now rumpled and damp with the night air. This micro-gesture, the immediate physical submission, was his ultimate surrender. He stopped resisting, stopped rationalizing the lie as self-protection, and allowed the raw, overwhelming guilt to flood him. He whispered through the glass, his voice thick with uncharacteristic sincerity, "I wasn't trying to trick you with my poverty, Clara. I was trying to find out if I was still capable of being loved without my empire." The window remained up. Clara slowly, deliberately reached for the console, and her hand brushed against the cashmere scarf he had left for her. She saw the elegant, high-design paperclip attached to the merger document still clutched in her other hand. The contrast was a metaphor for his broken duality. For a long, silent moment, she watched him, the powerful CEO humbled and exposed, clinging to the outside of her simple car. Then, with a slow, agonizing creak, she unlocked the door, allowing him into her space, allowing the real conversation to finally begin. Alex sat beside Clara in the small car, the opulent world of his manor just a distant, glittering haze in the rearview mirror. The cold air inside the car was thick with unsaid things, but the silence was no longer accusatory. It was heavy with potential understanding. He didn't offer excuses or corporate apologies. Instead, he reached into his work jacket, the one he'd worn for the part, and pulled out a simple, hand-carved wooden keychain she had given him on their second date, a cheap trinket, shaped like a tiny, clumsy whale. He held it out, his hand trembling slightly, a powerful CEO using a $5 object as proof of his authentic intent. "You gave me this," he said, his voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. "You said it was a reminder to keep swimming. I've held on to it for days, Clara, even when I was reviewing those merger documents." He nodded toward the printout. It meant more than anything in that house. The gesture, the preservation of her small, humble gift, amidst his overwhelming wealth, was the final, critical piece of proof. He wasn't afraid of the money. He was afraid of losing the real connection that this simplicity represented. Clara looked at the keychain, then at the exhausted sincerity etched on his face. She understood then that his pain wasn't fabricated. It was the isolation of power. He wasn't trying to trick her out of money. He was trying to trick fate into giving him a chance at genuine affection. The initial feeling of betrayal receded, replaced by a profound empathy for his quiet struggle. She gently took the keychain, her fingers brushing his, a fragile truce accepted not by a spoken word, but by a shared, silent recognition of mutual vulnerability. The story didn't end with a sweeping declaration of love or a guaranteed fairy tale. It ended with a deliberate, tangible choice. The following day, Alex went not to the corporate headquarters, but to the county hospital. He didn't pay the bill anonymously. He stood beside Clara as a partner, using his resources not to bribe her, but to solve her family's immediate painful burden, ensuring her father received the best care, not as a transaction, but as a commitment. The transformation was complete. Alex had stopped hiding the man behind the money, and Clara had stopped judging the man for the appearance of it. The final image is of them, shoulder to shoulder, gazing out the hospital window, a quiet alliance formed not on romance, but on genuine shared honesty, built in the shadow of true human need. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that true value isn't in a bank account. Tell us in the comments, who's the one person you'd never judge by their clothes?